Tonight, Batman shows he's willing to break his one rule for his most terrifying opponent, Mad Hatter. Green Team shows that money can't solve all your problems, but it will solve all the problems that matter. And Guy Gardner joins the Red Lantern Corps, and as a fellow Baltimorean, I get it. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 95 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and I know I've made this joke before, but you know, in college, there was always that one kid who would not turn in any of the work, and then right at the very end of the semester, he would try to turn in everything all at once for full credit. That's Geoff Johns. Geoff Johns was absolutely that kid, because we are now at the end of the month, and Geoff Johns is oh wait, I have 2 Justice League books in Aquaman that are due. I gotta turn those in right now. And so he did. It's not a positive, it's not a negative, but it's something that has been reinforced time and time again over the course of this show. How much Geoff Johns despises the idea of a deadline. Anyway, there is actually a lot of things to talk about this week, and I'm definitely going to go over on my normal time limit, but I do want to tell you what is coming up. So coming up this week, we have a bunch of different numbered issues of Batman the Dark Knight, Catwoman, Talon, Superman, Red Lanterns, Aquaman, Flash, Justice League of America, All-Star Western, Green Team, Teen Trillionaires, Teen Titans, and Justice League Dark. Skipped over 2 books, though, because this week we have 2 brand new number 1s, and those are Batman and Superman. That's one book. And then Larfleeze is getting his brand new number 1 as well. So I mentioned this last week, but things of note, besides the 2 new number 1s, is that Justice League 21 is actually the final part of the SHAZAM backup that has been running in the back of Justice League for over a year now. If you haven't been keeping up with that backup, just watch the first hour and a half of the SHAZAM movie. It's essentially the same, and then you can just chime back in here. Other than that, check them out. They're all in the backup episodes every time I've had a 5th week. Like I said, 2 new number 1s. The only other thing that I think is kind of worth noting here is that Justice League of America is pretty much just leading directly into Trinity War, which I haven't talked about a lot because it's kind of nebulous where it's actually starting and what's prologue and all that other stuff. But Trinity War is going to start, I believe, next month. So we are right on the cusp of that. I don't know what issue is bringing it off first, but I will definitely know by the time I hit the end of this show. So stay tuned for that. Beyond all that, not much more to say. I think I'm going to start the show with the new number 1s, so let's hop right into it. Batman Superman number 1, written by Gregg Pak, art by Jay Lee and Ben Oliver. So this kind of just came up out of nowhere. And I honestly have a hard time telling exactly when it's placed because it seems to kind of argue against a lot of established continuity. But we pick up years ago in Gotham City. Clark Kent is making his way through town. He's being he's walking through the middle of prostitutes and stuff like that, and he's dear Lord, what is this hellhole of a town? And we cut to the other side of Gotham in some sort of park where a bunch of kids are bullying this last kid named Zach, and Bruce Wayne, in disguise as just a homeless dude, is sitting there watching the whole thing, and he's oh, this kid's about to reach his breaking point, and he's going to show him what happens when you get pushed to the edge. And so he's about to unleash his inner fury on these bullies. And then all of a sudden Clark Kent runs in and he's hey, you kids, stop that. You shouldn't be fighting. And so all the bullies back off. And then Clark looks over at the kid and the kid's just flipping him off. And he's well, that's... didn't expect that. And Bruce, still in character, is just like, I don't think that was the help that kid wanted. I don't think you really need to get in there. And so Clark looks over at Bruce and he's like, oh, well, didn't expect to see the Bruce Wayne sitting here. And Bruce is like, how the hell is this guy know? I'm not Bruce Wayne. What are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, okay. Anyway, my name's Clark Kent. I work for the Daily Star. Can I have a word with you? And he's like, okay, fine. Yes, I am Bruce Wayne. I am slumming it on the bad end of town. What do you want? And he's like, oh, I don't run a gossip column. Don't worry, I'm not here to out you or anything like that. But 3 Wayne Enterprises employees have been murdered in Metropolis in the last 8 hours. You have any comment on that? And at that point, Bruce is like, well, I have to get going. Goodbye. And so he just gets up and tries to leave. And Clark calls him out. It's like, don't you care about the people in danger? And Bruce tells him, like, not going to break character. I've got to keep up the Playboy thing. But this guy just gets under my skin for some reason. And he's like, oh, you think you can help him? Yeah, just like you helped that kid there. Not everybody needs your style of help. So at that point, we see kind of just a quick little breakdown of, Clark describing his time in Smallville and how Mom and Pa taught him everything until they died in a car accident. And then Bruce's time in Gotham and how his mom and pa taught him anything until they died in an alley. And then we get back to the main story where in Metropolis, Bruce has bribed all of his employees to just leave for the night, except for one of them who was a former Marine, and he thought he was higher and more powerful than would ever show up. And then Catwoman shows up and is just starts destroying this guy, scratching him up to bits. Turns out his daughter's there as well, so she shows up. And as soon as the daughter gets involved, and it looks like Catwoman's going to do something awful to her, Batman comes crashing in through the giant clock face here and starts beating up Catwoman as best he can. However, in the middle of this guy activates a security protocol that's apparently experimental Wayne tech, and it starts attacking not only Catwoman, but Batman as well. So then Bruce has to grab the controller, enter in a different activation code, which then causes a bunch of horrific-looking robots to spring out of the ground and start attacking Catwoman, which at that point, Superman busts in through a wall and starts going after Batman because from his perspective, Batman just sicked a bunch of giant robots on some people. He's not an okay dude. And he's just throwing them around like they're nothing, and Batman's like, dear Lord, this guy, he's just bent titanium bones. If he sneezes, I'm dead. So he tries to do what he can. He throws out, some back grenades and whatnot, trying to mess around with Superman's senses. And Clark in his narration is just like, okay, he's starting to make me angry. This guy is kind of a dick. And I'm just going to go ahead and take him out because this freak needs to be taken out. So at that point, Batman manages to sneak in a back grenade to the point where it blasts Clark outside of the building. This is before he knows how to fly. He's still in his t-shirt and jeans phase. So he crashes down to the street below and has a filing cabinet fall on top of him. And it looks like Bruce is just throwing everything out the window, trying to get it to land on Superman. Superman blasts some of it with his heat vision. And then we see Catwoman this whole time. Turns out she has actually been possessed by this weird spirit-looking creature. And the spirit comes out of it and says, all right, now let's have some real fun. So as Superman jumps up to attack Batman again, Batman's ready to fight back. The spirit jumps in the middle, causes a big explosion that makes both of them disappear, and just leaves Catwoman like, why in the hell am I in Metropolis? So we follow Superman, who comes out of the explosion, and as he gets his senses again, he sees that he's in Smallville, and he crashes down to the ground, and it's just like, okay, whatever that bat thing is, he knows why I'm back in Smallville, and he knows to go to Smallville. He knows my secret identity. I got to take him out. And as he turns around, he sees Batman there, but he's wearing a different costume. He's not wearing the same thing. And Batman's like, Clark, what are you doing? Also, why are you wearing the t-shirt and jeans getup again? And Batman activates a kryptonite thing as Superman goes to attack him. And he's like, how did you know about kryptonite? And he's like, you told me to have this ready, just in case you ever went rogue. are you okay, man? It seems like you're not even recognizing me. And at that point, Clark's like, I don't know you. You're awful. And he is dying because of the kryptonite. So Batman very quickly is like, okay, sorry, yeah, kryptonite, I'll turn it off. So he goes to turn it off. Clark actually gets in, grabs the kryptonite, and throws it away before he can. He's like, yeah, all right, fair enough. But you need to rest. You've been weakened. And Superman's like, oh, good. That means I can go all out. And he just starts beating the crap out of Batman to the point where Batman's like, okay, I ain't doing so hot here. I need to worry about this. But then Clark looks over as he has Batman on the ropes. He hears a familiar voice. Turns out it's Pa Kent, Jonathan Kent, who's still alive, and he comes up and he sees Clark and he's like, son, what are you doing? What have you done? And we get that ghost face again saying, oh, this is just perfect. I don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, obviously we're going with some version of an origin story, like way back to the point where they first met. But the issue being is that Geoff Johns in Justice League Origin already established how they met. That was in issue 2 of Justice League. Like, that was one of the first things that happened. So I don't really know how we can change that up. It seems like we're going with a parallel timeline or universe or something, but like, it's weird. It's a weird little mix up here, and I'm interested. It's got me intrigued, but I'm just not sure where it's going. As for the art, both Jay Lee and Ben Oliver give this very dreamlike quality to it, which makes all of it just feel off. Nobody seems like it's on model. All of them are just this super stylized version of themselves. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's definitely an acclimated taste sort of thing, and I'm not quite acclimated yet. So I'm interested in this book, but it's throwing a lot at me all at once, and I don't think it's quite found its footing with issue 1. Like, it's a good eye catch, but it really needs to deliver next issue is what I'm saying. So overall, this one I'm going to say I can't give it over a 7 just because it's a bit too messy. It's just got a bit too much thrown in right now. I'm curious, I'm interested, and maybe in hindsight I would give this a higher rating, but as for right now, it's just a flat 7. Larfleeze #1, written by Keith Giffen and JMD Mateus, art by Scott Collins. So this is picking up from a backup story that spun out of Threshold, and I covered all that backup story, but if you don't remember or don't care to go back, the gist of it is that Larfleeze was tricked by an orange lantern construct of Sade, his captive guardian, and Sade destroyed all of his stuff, literally his entire treasure trove, including his orange lantern power battery. So he has no way to recharge his ring, and that's pretty much where we pick up here. We are at the creation point of the universe where matter is destroyed and turned into energy and whatnot, and Larfleeze is just sitting on a rock with his new captive butler guy named Stargrave, and Stargrave's like, you got like 10-15 minutes of charge left in that battery. You should probably get us out of here before we die a horrible slow death at the creation point. And Larfleeze is just crying and sobbing, saying like, no, how dare you? All of my stuff is gone. And Stargrave's like, dude, you're whining and complaining. Like, shouldn't you can go out and get more stuff? And Larfleeze just slaps him and just be like, psh, I have nothing left to live for. None of this is worth anything. And Stargrave tells him, like, I think you're overreacting a little bit. And Larfleeze freaks out on him, saying he's not overreacting. And he tells Larfleeze, like, look, just remember who you are. You are Larfleeze. You are an immortal being. You have this great, you were the Orange Lantern. You can go out. You can get more stuff. Like, you are great. And Larfleeze is like, I am pretty great. I am pretty awesome. And you know what? I'm gonna tell you just how awesome I am. And he begins to recount his origin story. And Stargrave apparently has heard this a dozen times. And he's like, please, we do not have time for this. Do not go through your origin story. And he's like, once upon a time, on a planet called Spilkaz. I'm gonna give the broad strokes here, but basically he was born into a farming family who he had 16 brothers and sisters. His mother and father were like, oh God, he's hideous. And mind you, they're working out in the field and she just the baby just plops out. And it is horrific looking. But regardless of like, oh God, he's even uglier than the other ones. Can we sell him? It's like, no, we already reached our legal limit of selling our kids. So gotta raise this one. And then he's recounting all this as like, oh, I was never born into the most loving and caring family. They loved me unconditionally, and as did my siblings. And we see the siblings just beat him up because he's like less than a year old and he's not doing any yard work or anything where they still have to work. And then all of a sudden, his planet is attacked by 10,000 warships, and he is taken into slavery. And of course, he's telling his slave this. He's like, you can never understand what it's like to live beholden to someone else with no choice of your own. And Stargrave's like, yeah, sounds like it sucks. But regardless, he recounts how years went on and he was forced to mate with one of the female slaves. And Stargrave apparently doesn't recognize this part. He's like, wait a minute, no, you never said you had a wife. And it's like, yes, her name was Bronchia. And we had many, many children together who also were all sold into slavery across the universe. And he's like, why have you not mentioned this part before? And he's like, it changes every time. It's an epic. You get more detail each time. He's like, yeah, it sounds like you're making it up as you go. And he's like, anyway, so one day he decided he cannot work in these mines anymore. He snuck out in the cart that disposed of all the dead bodies, assuming they would take him out of the mine. Turns out they just brought him up to a different layer and threw him in a crematorium. But his race of people are extremely durable and functionally immortal. So he was able to climb out of the crematorium and make his way to the basic security center of the planet. And once there, he disabled the security, and all of the slaves started revolting. And Stargrave's like, oh, and you were leading them like a fearless leader? He's like, nah, that was dangerous as hell. I was staying way back until everything cooled off. So at that point, he's like, yep, and that's how I escaped slavery. And then that sounds like it's all fresh new stuff to Larfleeze's origin, but then we get stuff that sounds like it's more set in stone, where he becomes a master thief and he gets a map. Well, first off, the Manhunters were there, and that was like several billion years ago, and Larfleeze was already 2 million years old at that point. But regardless, he gets a map that belonged to Krona that leads to the planet Okara, and he goes in and with other members of his race, and he discovers the Orange Lantern power battery. And everyone else kind of doesn't care about it, but he's locked onto it. He grabs it, and he realizes, like, the others are going to want this. I have to keep it for myself. And so he kills all of his fellow mates, and then the Lantern instructs him on how to use the ring, so he becomes the first Orange Lantern. So at that point, he finishes up his story, and he's like, yes, of course, but first let me tell you how I hated the Guardians. And he's just like, yeah, no, I know this part. The Guardians said stay in the Vega system, but then they broke the deal and you attacked them. Yeah, we all know that part, but you need to tell me, how long has it been since you started telling this story? And he's like, it's been like 20 minutes. And Stargrave points out, like, okay, if it's been 20 minutes and you had 15% of battery left and we're still alive, that means that somehow you have become an organic battery of your Orange Lantern ring. You don't need your battery anymore. And he's like, okay, what does that mean? And Stargrave's like, okay, I don't know how to better explain it, but maybe we can do this away from the giant thing that, like, is going to turn us into energy. And then all of a sudden, from the creation point springs this giant energy dog that just reaches out and bites Larfleeze and swallows him whole in one bite. And Stargrave is like, Master! Hooray! He's dead! But then Larfleeze explodes with orange energy, destroying the dog. And Stargrave's like, okay, no, fantastic, cool. But, like, we really got to bounce before something worse shows up. And it's like, oh, like what? And then all of a sudden, this huge energy beast with another dog comes out. And he says, who slew the faithful hound of the Lord of the Hunt? And Larfleeze is like, oh my God, he has so much treasure. Look at him. He's covered in it. I'm going to get that treasure. And he just stands up and is like, I'm the one who killed your dog. Let's fight. And that's where the issue leaves off. I wasn't a huge fan of the backup story back in Threshold. I thought that it was paced very Strangely, it wasn't slow or fast. It kind of just varied throughout the whole thing. But either way, wasn't a fan. This one I'm liking a bit more, but it's hard to tell because so much of it was just an origin story. But I like the fact that they had an entire issue of breathing room to like tell these jokes and do these tongue-in-cheek things. It's a fun book. I'll give it that much for sure. The only issue that I'm running into is the fact of the character by definition is very one note. And I just want to make sure they're not going to run that note into the ground. So it's working for me so far. I'm enjoying the straight man comedic guy routine here we got going on with Stargrave. I just hope that we can keep it fresh for long enough that it doesn't get old and outstay its welcome. Overall, this issue I'll give it a flat 7. It's fine. It's an okay book. But it is really too early to tell. It's really too soon to say whether or not this is a success or just another one of these books we're kicking out in the middle of the new 52. Justice League number 21, written by Geoff Johns, art by Gary Frank. This is the finale to the backup story of SHAZAM that has been going on for like over a year now. So, if you know that, you know that. Otherwise, it's the movie, with the difference being instead of Savannah, it's Black Adam. So, Black Adam has all of Billy's siblings captured, and he's like, I'll kill him if you don't give me the powers of Shazam. And there's also the 7 deadly sins flying around, and they are currently looking for a suitable host of the most rotten soul in the city. So Black Adam tells him, like, look, give me your powers or else I'm going to kill them. Like, I can tell that they're important to you. And then we cut over to whatever his name is, the really dicky guy who, like, has been threatening Billy with legal action this whole thing. And it's Mr. Breyer. That's it. All the sins feel Mr. Breyer, and they're like, he's the worst. Everyone pile in. So they all go into Mr. Breyer's body, and he becomes this huge hulking demon monster that is just breathing fire on the whole city. And it's attacking people, but Black Adam's like, hey, over here, look at me. I'm about to kill Freddy unless you give me the powers. Like, I mean it. I'm going to do it. And Billy's like, okay, hold on. Just don't hurt them. Like, I'll do it. And Freddy says, no, don't do it. This guy's a dick. And so he picks up Mary alongside. And Billy's like, okay, fine. Power's yours. But I have no idea how to do that. What do I do? And he's like, look, we both have the living lightning inside of us. We're practically family because of that. You just got to, like, say the magic word and send it my way. And Billy sees, I think her name's Francesca, the, like, mirror woman in a water puddle nearby. And he's like, oh, family. That was a thing. You said that. And he said family. And, like, it's all triggering for me that family is what it, like, can be, not what it should be. So he says the magic word and transfers his power over, and it looks like it goes all into Black Adam, but then Black Adam's like, I don't feel any different. And we get the 2-page spread of the entire Shazam family, and everyone's like, oh, this is awesome. So they all start flying and experimenting with their powers, and Freddy's like, dear Lord, Mary, you are hot. And he's like, you're an idiot. All right. And as they're wondering what to do next, Billy's like, get him. So they all start attacking Black Adam. Adam punches off Freddy. Pedro, no, not Pedro. What's his name? The other one. Eugene. He goes after to take care of Freddy, and apparently he's able to talk to technology. It just asks this van to move off of Freddy's body, and it does so. We see one of them, I'm so bad with the names, Darla. She is super fast and, like, able to move around super quickly. Pedro's super strong, and Mary basically has all the same powers of Billy. So once Black Adam gets his hands on Darla, Mary and Billy come in and just hit the ever-loving hell out of Black Adam, blasting him across the city. We see the demon is still attacking, and everyone's like, oh, hey, that's Mr. Breyer. We should probably do something about that. So Billy says, all right, you guys take care of Breyer and also protecting all the civilians. I'll take care of Black Adam. This is, like, it's my one-on-one thing. So he goes after him. we see Black Adam is telling him, like, you're just a kid. Like, you don't understand how the world works. You don't understand what I'm doing here. I am the hero here. And he comes in and sneak attacks Billy from behind. Cutting over to the rest of the kids, we just see them protecting people and kind of deciding on, like, what their superhero names could be. And Freddy throws out, like, well, I'm King Shazam if he's just normal Shazam. And we see them attacking Mr. Breyer, and even Mary's getting into it, like, okay, yeah, that's pretty sweet. So back at the Black Adam fight, Billy gets thrown into the zoo, specifically into Tawny's cage, the tiger. And when Billy's down for the count, Tawny comes out and attacks Black Adam. But of course, being a normal tiger, Black Adam just backhands Tawny away. To which Billy remembers how he told Tawny, like, you're the closest thing to family I've got. So he uses his same family powers onto Tawny and makes it this super huge lightning-powered tiger. But apparently he did the spell wrong and it starts backfiring. And not only does it undo Tawny's transformation, it also starts undoing all of the other Marvel Family's transformations. I say Marvel, it's Shazam Family, but, like, it's hard to shake that. So they continue to try to fight Mr. Breyer, but, like, they're losing their powers quickly and they have to end up retreating. And we see Dr. Sivana, by the way, he's throughout this whole thing, he's kind of just limping around because the magic inside of his body is, like, eating away at his soul. So he's not doing so hot. But regardless, Black Adam tells Billy that he can't win. It's a moot point. And Billy transforms again back into a kid. And he's like, I'm not going to fight you because I'm proving a point here. You're not a hero. You're bullying a child. What is wrong with you, man? And Black Adam just picks him up and be like, you kids, you think this world is, like, so black and white, but it's not. Like, you can't change stuff like that. I'm just going to do what I need to do. And Billy says, like, okay, well, if you're so strong, if you're so sure you're going to win, do it without magic. Transform back. If you win, I promise you I'll give you the power. Otherwise, you leave and never come back. Deal? And Black Adam goes, no. And then he's like, fine, whatever. Beat up a kid. Show how good of a hero you are. And that gets to Black Adam enough that he transforms back into Amon. That was his name. And he immediately collapses because he is thousands of years old and he's never transformed back. And so he sees his reflection and he's like, yeah, you're gonna, like, die now because you should have died, like, centuries ago. So at that point, he lunges after Billy, but then just starts collapsing into dust, and before too long, he's nothing. And because there is no one else sharing the power right now, Billy transforms back into Shazam, fully powered up, and he immediately scares off the Seven Sins. They're like, oh, okay, Black Adam lost, we gotta bail. So they all leave Mr. Breyer's body, and leaving him naked in the middle of town square, and everyone laughs at him. So there's that. Billy, he comes back to the scene as Shazam, and everyone's like, oh, hey, that kid stopped a robbery, and he stopped all those monsters, and he also crushed the school. And he's like, yeah, sorry about the school thing, but I guess school's canceled. And all the kids just cheer, and everyone's happy. So then we cut to Christmas morning. Darla wakes Billy up and says, oh, you gotta come, Santa's here, let's go get our presents. And so they all go downstairs, and Freddy asks Billy, like, so, you think you're gonna stick around after all? And he says, where else am I gonna go? And then for the final page, we see Dr. Sivana has made his way back to the doorway that Black Adam opened up to get to the Rock of Eternity. He's not able to enter, but he can still see inside. And inside is this little vial that talks to him, saying, like, hey, we don't have a long time, but my name is Mr. Mind, and we will be the best of friends. So, setting up future things with Dr. Sivana and Mr. Mind, which will never be paid off. It's okay. I like it. The entire arc overall, great. This ending chapter, it was what it needed to be. I mean, I think that it was very clever to have Amon change back into his human form rather than being Black Adam the whole time. It was a clever way to wrap up that fight because they were two, not even evenly matched. He was outclassed. Billy was outclassed by Black Adam. So I think that was a clever enough ending. But the rest of it was just kind of, yeah, we're putting the pieces of the puzzle where they need to be, and we're just getting everything where they have to go in terms of, like, we only have Shazam being the one with powers after this. We only have, we hinted on all these extra things that could show up in the future, but we don't have to deal with them right now. So overall, Shazam, fantastic backup story. It really is beautiful to look at. Gary Frank's art, magnificent the whole way through. For this particular issue, being Justice League 21, I'd say it's, I'll give it an 8. I'll give it an 8, and I think it is just really well done. It's a fantastic little slice, and obviously it was published in its own little trade. Pick up the trade if you have not. It's a fantastic way to read it. Overall, Shazam is a high mark in terms of the new 52 so far. Batman The Dark Knight number 21, written by Gregg Hurwitz, art by Ethan Van Sciver. So last issue, of course, Batman's lady love died. She was killed by Mad Hatter because she wouldn't play along with the Alice in Wonderland thing, and Batman wasn't able to get to her in time. So this issue picks up with Alfred being like, Batman, hey, you still there? I got the coordinates. Is everything cool? Did you save her life? And Batman's all mopey and sad and whatnot. And then he gets very, very pissed off and says, yeah, send me the coordinates. And we see that the people on top of the GCPD are like, oh my god, I've never seen Batman so pissed off. Forget Bat, he's a pterodactyl. That's Jim Gordon who says that line. Just wanted to really repeat that. So at that point, he flies off, and Alfred's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't right now. Maybe take a second to cool down. And Batman's like, you gonna stop me? And he's like, no, never mind. Have fun. Goodbye. So Batman arrives, and he tells Mad Hatter, open the doors. I'm here. Let's have this out. And he goes through Mad Hatter's Wonderland thing, and a bunch of people there, all under his mind control, start attacking Batman. And he's like, all right, look, I know he's controlling them with the hats, but, I really don't care right now. So he's beating up a lot of them. But then he uses his grappling hook to get out of the mob. And he goes up to where, I'm assuming Tweedledee is. And he's like, Batman, listen to me. I'm not here to fight you. And Batman just ties him up with battering stuff. And we see that all of the hats are now broken. For some reason, hitting a TV screen was enough to disable all the hats. So all the hostages, they're making their way out. He doesn't have to worry about them. Tweedledee's out of the running as well. So it's just Mad Hatter versus Batman. And Mad Hatter's taunting him over the loudspeaker. And we see him drinking all of his special tea and whatnot. And he takes some of the tea powder and holds it in his hand. And as Batman makes his way down and sees the eat me and drink me cake and drink, kicks open a door, and Mad Hatter blows the powder into his face. And it seems like it's some version of scarecrow toxin mixed with his own thing. But regardless, he's seeing a whole bunch of psychedelic crap, along with a really messed up, broken version of Natalia's body. And she's basically taunting him, being like, is this what you wanted? You were so afraid to let me in. Now you're all alone forever. Isn't that what you wanted, Bruce? And he's like, no, that's not what I wanted. Stop it. So then we get a thing of him going back to the night his parents were shot, because of course he is. And finally he's just like, all right, I've been drugged. I know I've been drugged. Just focus on how pissed off you are right now. And that manages to get him to the point where he is able to see Tweedledum coming at him with a chain, and he just destroys his jaw. It is not okay. And so he comes after Mad Hatter, and Hatter's like, oh yeah, I'm ready. I'm all dosed up. I'm ready to take down Batman. And Batman's like, yeah, I'm dosed up too. And Batman just starts destroying him to the point where he's pleading for him to stop. Alfred comes over the comms, and he's like, maybe you should stop. You're gonna kill him. And he gives one last uppercut to Mad Hatter, knocks him out, and he lands in the big old pool that they had built, the lake. And Mad Hatter's unconscious, so he's gonna drown. And Batman just turns and walks away. And Alfred's like, okay, come on, seriously, he's gonna die. Go back and pull him out. This isn't you. You know this isn't right. And Batman's just like, fine. So he turns around, dives in, gets Mad Hatter out, and saves his life. Then we see him sometime later coming back to the Batcave, covered in blood, and he's talking to Alfred, and he's like, "Don't worry, none of it's mine." Or sorry, no, he actually does say none of it's mine. For a second there, I thought he's like, "Don't worry, it is mine." So Alfred's stitching up Bruce, and he's like, "Oh, for a moment there, I thought I lost you, Master Wayne." And he's like, "Yeah, for a moment there, I think you did." So then a full month passes, and the GCPD has fixed back up the bat signal, seemingly with scotch tape. And they're like, "Well, it better work. There was a heist, and we need Batman on this." So they light it up, and we see Bruce is back in the cave. He's looking at the cowl, and Alfred's like, "Okay, like 2 or 3 issues ago, you talked to me about like maybe not being Batman anymore. Just consider that. Keep that in mind. Just try to like think about that. Maybe you shouldn't go out there and answer the call." And then of course he sees the signal, and before Alfred can even turn around, he's out there and he's behind Jim saying, "You rang." And that's the arc. It's weird in that I think that this arc as a whole, and it's been a long arc, I think that it does a good job of defining like the general Batman story. Like it reminds me a lot of Batman 89 in like, you know, he wrestles with, does he want to be Batman? And then he has more loss, and then he like he doubles down and he's like, "No, I'm definitely Batman." Like, I get it. My question is, why did this need to be Mad Hatter? And the answer is, they had an interesting backstory for Mad Hatter. They had a good little plot of, oh, have we ever really defined what made Mad Hatter Mad Hatter? Let's go back and get that origin story set up. So it's not awful, but I also think that by the time you reach the end of it, it doesn't feel like it actually did much of anything with either side of the story. Like the fact that we just get a single page devoted to, oh, it's been a month and he might not have been going out as Batman during that whole month. In fact, I think the GCPD specifically says that. Nah, he might have been going out as Batman that whole time, and they just like, oh, but this is the first time the bat signal's working again. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like they ever really made it feel like an important story. And the fact that I don't think any other book has referenced the fact that Natalia died, the fact that this book is forced to then go back and reference, like, yes, Robin is also dead, remember that. It just feels like you're putting, pardon the pun, a hat on a hat. Where, like, yeah, Natalia died, but, like, we already have him struggling with the death of a Robin. So, like, is this really necessary? So, overall, I'll give this one, specifically this issue, it's like a 6.5. It's nothing special. It's above average, but it's not great by any means. The arc as a whole, it's probably worth like a 7. But again, same sort of thing. Not great, not fantastic. I'd say that the Szymon Kudranski art on the Mad Hatter issues, that's the high point. But when it comes down to Batman, this is definitely the lowest tier book. Catwoman number 21, written by Ann Nocenti, art by Rafa Sandoval. So last issue was the annual, which I said felt like it didn't matter at all, and it didn't. It played no part in this at all. They offhandedly mention it. So we basically pick up with Penguin's going to bomb the Badlands, and he's already dropping a bunch of bombs to attack this rat tail crew. And we see that Catwoman is like trying to stop them because they've also got bikes on the ground that are shooting at people as well. And she's just going around trying to rescue people. And we get one woman named Tess who is trying to get a gallon of milk, and she's like thinking in her head all these things of like, oh man, just like my dad, boom, and then quiet. And then she's like, oh, I should tweet that out. She constantly is bringing up that she needs to tweet it out. But regardless, Catwoman rescues her from getting shot. She goes back for the milk, and then whatever. So we see the Rat Tail crew is talking with Catwoman. They're basically like, all right, what's the plan? Do we just surrender to Penguin? Because he's got literal helicopters and drones and stuff. And it's like, no, you can't surrender to Penguin. You're just going to be paying him money forever. And it's like, okay, but like he's shooting at us. But regardless, they side with Catwoman, and she's like, all right, because I trust you, I'm going to take you up to the roof. And it turns out that all the people in the area are also siding with the rat tails. So they've built these like catapults and bombs and stuff to attack Penguin. Then we get this one dude named Volt, who I feel like we've been introduced to before. He sounds familiar, but he is the vaguest shell of a character I've ever met. Regardless, they hit him with a bomb. He goes down over the side of a building into some water, which happens to have an electrical wire in it. And so he comes out with electricity powers. We won't be seeing him again. So then we go back to Tess, who's getting more milk. She literally says, gotta get more milk. This is a character that is still, it's around. Regardless, helicopters attacking. Rat Tail and Catwoman do a makeshift zip line, and they like have to use some gloves to get across, so it's like burning their hands. And when they arrive, they take down the helicopter and literally have it explode on top of the building. Later, we see that some of Penguin's goons, who are like half-dressed women, because of course they are bad-mouthing Penguin because he's so weird. And then Lark comes in and slaps one of them and says, you got to be loyal to the guy who pays your bills. And then we cut over to the Gotham City morgue, where bodies are just crazy piling up. And Bullock is talking to the mayor and saying, hey, let me send cops in there to stop Penguin from bombing the city. And the mayor's like, no, let Penguin do his thing, and then we'll just clean up the garbage afterwards, because I guess they don't like the Badlands. Something to point out, strangely enough, is that both pages right next to each other have the exact same panel of the Gotham newspaper saying like this war is ongoing. No change at all between the two of them. They even have a tear in the exact same place. I have no idea why they did this. Regardless, we then cut over to Penguin saying, why aren't we winning? How could they have the upper hand? And Lark explains, like, this is their turf. They know all the tunnels and stuff. They're literally rats. And Penguin doesn't like that, so he smacks her. And they basically go through the course of... This is the only reference to the annual, saying that one of them brought in an ice cream truck that was supposed to get kids hooked on drugs, but he didn't. And he's very disappointed in that. And that's it. That's the only reference. So then one of them brings up the fact of like, okay, the idea was we were going to go after Catwoman and the people she loved, but it turns out she doesn't love anybody. She's not close to anybody. But then one guy brings up, actually, she seems kind of close to that rat tail leader guy. And Penguin's like, aha, well, ready my helicopter. I'll show you amateurs how a war is done. So they continue shooting down some random goons of Penguin, and it shows that she is getting kind of close to the rat tail leader. And then we see Penguin arrive in his helicopter, and he is opening up like a full assault. And he's like, Catwoman, surrender now or I will kill everyone you love. And she's like, I don't care about anybody. What are you talking about? There's literally no one you can attack. And she's like, okay, fine. And so he blows open a hole in the ground, which Rat Tail falls into, and Catwoman reaches down and apparently tries to grab him by his rat tail. She thinks she succeeds, but it turns out it's just a kitten that she's grabbed by the tail. And then the girl, Tess, who has been so focused on getting this milk, as she arrives at the group with the milk, a rock hits it and it explodes. Rule of threes, I guess. Anyway, it leaves off with a giant hole in, like, the Badlands, and then it says next issue, Catwoman goes underground. What are we doing? Why are we here? Just to suffer. I don't even get the point of this issue. Like, okay, it's a full all-out war. Penguin versus this random gang, because who cares? It can exist on its own. I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with that idea existing. My problem is like, it feels like none of it matters, and yet they're still claiming it to be like the biggest thing. And I don't even care about like impact on the universe. I care about like impact on this book, because it constantly feels like it's only gonna matter for this issue. And then as soon as I get to the next one, like, is there going to be a giant hole underground still? I don't know. I don't know if this war is still going to be ongoing. Like, I feel like Ann Nocenti only ever remembers the last page she wrote of every issue, and she's just, like, carrying that down the line. It's disappointing. It really is. And not that I had high hopes for the books to begin with, but, like, it's just not a good time. So, overall, I mean, 5, if even. It's not awful. It's stupid in a lot of bad ways, but I can forgive that if it's just like even mildly entertaining. But it's not. It's not entertaining, either good or bad. It's just there to pad out the 52 comics that DC feels the need to have. So yeah, I'll just give it a flat 5. Do better. Talon number 9, written by James Tynion IV, art by Graham Nolan. So last issue technically was Birds of Prey number 21, where they just fought for a while, and then Talon was going to kill the Talon in that book, and then thought, no, I can't do that, I'm no killer. And then the Talon in that book, named Strix, had a different idea. So we get that recap page saying all that stuff that's going to happen there. And it turns out that Strix's idea was that because of stuff going on in the Birds of Prey book, there was another woman's body here that was being experimented on. So Strix just takes her costume off, puts it on this woman's body, and tells Calvin to use the little melty juice goo stuff that he got from the Grandmaster on her because she's dead. And that should be enough to hopefully fool them. So at that point, he's like, okay, here's the thing. Strix, I know I can trust you. I see it in your eyes. But, like, I am not a good person anymore. And she's confused. Like, what are you saying like that? And he just says, like, look, you need to keep fighting the good fight. I'm not sure I can. Just do what you got to do. And she seems grateful, seems happy because she doesn't speak. And then he walks off and says, like, all right, now let's see if this is going to work. So he delivers the body back to the Grandmaster. He seems to go for it. He's like, yeah, all right, good job, you did it. So anyway, here's the thing. That was your little test. Now we're sending you out to take care of Bane and Sebastian Clark, and he explains the whole thing of, like, they're on Santa Prisca, it's this prison island, blah, blah, blah. And Calvin basically says, like, you and I both know that it is going to be impossible to do this. Like, it's Bane, and I am at best a C-list character here. And he's like, well, you better try very hard, or else something's going to happen to your lovely Casey and her daughter. And he's like, all right, here's the thing. I'll do it, but I have one request. And we see Casey is still being tortured by the Butcher, and he's trying to get out information from her. And Calvin comes in and says, hey, Grandmaster said I could have 2 minutes alone with her. Get out. And he's just like, fine, whatever. So he comes up, and she's just amazed that he's alive. And Calvin's like, yeah, all right, I'm not really alive, but more on that later. Point being is, your daughter's okay. She's fine. She's being brainwashed, but she's okay. So that's a problem, though, because they likely will only need one of you to get access to all the Securitas stuff. So your time is probably running short, but I'm working on it. I'm doing my best. I just needed to see you. And then he gives her a big old smooch and says, remember everything I taught you. Goodbye. And he walks out. It turns out during the smooch, he passed over like a lockpick or something in the tongue. So yeah, that's happening. So then we see him being airdropped over Santa Prisca. He activates his parachute to get the attention of the automatic turrets there, and then he releases the parachute so that they'll only fire at the parachute, and he's able to get in unscathed. A bunch of Bane's men all start spreading out. Calvin grabs one of them, gasses him, and takes his clothes so they can blend in. And as he's walking around the island, he sees a bunch of different experiments being done by Bane's men, We see, I mean, a lot of these were in a backstory that was in Detective Comics number 19, I believe. It's just a guy with like a big brain and his name's Professor, and a guy who's very muscly and his name is Brute. It's just the same as it ever was. But a group of soldiers see Calvin peering into the lab and they're like, hey, you're off duty. Come on, like, get with us or else you're going to be the next guinea pig. So they all march into Bane's room and he's like, hey, so you let a guy get onto our island despite all this high-tech stuff, all these turrets and whatnot that you vouched for, and now he's running around on an island. Am I right? And the soldier's like, yes, Mr. Bane, but I take full responsibility. And he's like, yeah, you do. And he smashes the guy's head against the wall, just completely crushes it, and starts stomping on his body. And then Sebastian Clark walks in, and he's like, is that really necessary? Is that everything what you're doing? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. You want in on this? Is this something you want? And he's like, no, just saying. So Bane orders his soldiers, including, little does he know, Calvin, to go find the body and to take Clark back to his room first. So they're all leading Clark back to his room, and Calvin puts some tranquilizers into the guards' necks, and then he reveals himself. He's like, hello, Sebastian. Bet you didn't expect to see me. And he's like, no, yeah, that's actually a shock. So then we cut back to Casey real quick, who uses her lockpick to get out of her shackles. She removes one of her teeth, which apparently has a broad span Morse signal networking thing, and she just clicks it and it starts sending out a signal. Cut to the other side of the world on a beach where Anya and Joey, remember these guys from like issue 2? They all of a sudden feel this buzzing in their head and they're like, Casey's in trouble, we gotta go. So they're automatically up and on the case. Cut back to Santa Prisca, and basically it's just a single page of Calvin saying like, you ruined my life and now I'm gonna kill you. And Sebastian's like, you're not gonna kill me, you're not a killer. And he's like, oh, a lot has changed, Sebastian. Dying and coming back changes a man. And he's like, fair enough, but you're also not gonna kill me because of this. And he motions behind him, and it turns out one of Bane's men named Wolf Spider, who's this dude who has augmented limbs, is there to rip Calvin apart, and that's that. So, not a bad issue. I will say they decided, Graham Nolan as the artist decided to give Calvin, instead of just like the rough 5 o'clock shadow he's been having in all of his comics, they gave him a full-on like soul patch, and I hate it so much. I cannot describe, like, it changes the character intrinsically, and I just hate the way he looks. So that's that, I guess. But regardless, it's an okay-ish. It just kind of feels like, okay, we had our Birds of Prey crossover because we kind of needed to pump both of these books up a little bit, and this is hoping that we can get a little bit of crossover there. But as soon as we got past the first like 3 pages, we were done with that and we were never looking back. So I think Birds of Prey was benefiting from it more than Talon was. And then the rest of the stuff, yeah, Bane, I don't know much of Bane's cadre, I guess, like his little group of people, but it's okay. It's not a bad supporting cast, but I do think that it is going to benefit from when we get back to it just being a showdown with Bane. So overall, I'll give this one like I'll give it just a flat 7. It's fine. It's not a standout book right now, but I do still enjoy the character arcs and how everything's moving. It's one long character arc, and I'm enjoying that. Superman number 21, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Kenneth Rocafort. So last issue, it was a whole big thing of Superman had Hector Hammond's like brain inside of his head, and then Orion showed up and helped cast it out, and that was just a thing. This issue picks up totally separate plot line of Hive, and they have the queen of the Hive who's bathing in technoplasmic waste, and she's just basically looking at Hector Hammond on a thing saying like, oh god, I'm so hot for that. His brain, his psionic energy, so powerful, I need it. And this weird speechless drone guy comes up, and she's like, yes, go and get Hector Hammond, and then we will have the world to ourselves, and we will save it from itself. So then we see in Star Labs, one of the scientists is getting the breakdown on like, yeah, no, Hector Hammond, he was like, he all of a sudden was very active and then all of a sudden wasn't. Now he's just kind of whatever. We don't know what's going on with him. And then one of the scientists' eyes start turning in like golden color and some hive markings show up on his head. And it's just like, oh God, you're one of them. And then all of a sudden he starts infecting the other members of Star Labs, and they're just like, okay, all of us now are going to get Hector Hammond out of here. We are going to get rid of the chaos that is individuality, and all shall be one, and blah, blah, blah. So we pick up with Clark, who is at a Chinese restaurant in Gotham City waiting for a source for his column or whatever. And he's like, boy, seems like they bailed. Oh, well. And then all of a sudden this gun points at him from the back of his head. And he's just like, I'm just a blogger, ma'am. You don't need to attack me. Or says, sir. But then we see like, okay, this person's the source. Very hooded and mysterious. Can't see anything. But then Clark's just like, well, I'm just going to use a little x-ray vision. And like, oh, hey, it's a woman in there. But I don't recognize her. It could be anybody. And then this person lays down a huge stack of files, including the senator who was giving Superman a hard time about having like a Fortress of Solitude and all that a couple issues back. And he's just like, yeah, no. All these people are part of a thing called the 20, which is some sort of urban myth that Clark has heard about but doesn't think exists. So back at Star Labs, there's this giant hive ship that's about to take off, and the other people who haven't been infected yet are like, shoot it down, like we can't risk Hector Hammond getting away and getting out of our grips. So they shoot the ship, it explodes, causing massive damage to Star Labs, and we see it was all just a distraction. The real extraction thing was down in the sewers below, and they call up the queen of the hive and saying like, oh yeah, we got him, we'll be out your place like in 12 minutes or so. And it's like, ah, sweet. And we see this dangling electrical wire underneath them. So we then go back to Clark, who is on a plane because now that the Daily Planet is not able to fund his excursions, he can't just disappear and reappear all around the world. Despite the fact I feel like it should be easier to not have a paper trail at that point, but regardless, he has to actually ride on this plane now. And he's like, oh, but I'm still doing it not just for that reason, but because I have to be a human. I will never give up on my humanity. He spent a very long time saying that. So as they're making their way through the sewer, a live wire hits the sewer water. It electrifies Hector Hammond, which apparently makes him the most powerful mind in either the world or the universe for just an instant. And he connects with all of the minds in Metropolis and like infects them to some extent. And the plane, which is landing at this point, he looks around at all the people around. They're all freaking out. And he's like, oh, right, I had blocks put in my brain by Orion. This is probably that. I should deal with that. But then he's like, but I can't just leave the plane. They'll wonder what happened to Clark Kent. So they explicitly say he waited for everyone to onboard the plane and then he left, which the art does not say that. The art just shows the plane like still landing and he's just flying as Superman. But regardless, we see Lois Lane runs basically into traffic and is like standing there in a Superman pose and just like, oh, we must stand for something or else we will fall for anything. And she's about to get hit by a bus. And then it says a moment later and Superman's just saved her. We don't get to see the saving. Superman just already did it. And he's just like, Miss Lane, what was that about? And she's just like, oh, I don't even know how I got here. What's going on? And then he hears Jimmy Olsen crying, saying how alone he is nearby. So he flies over to Jimmy. Turns out Jimmy is living in a penthouse because his parents passed away and left him $1 billion. But he's feeling super lonely and like, oh, ever since, like, I can't relate to anybody else. I'm all alone. And then all of a sudden he snaps out of it and he's like, oh, wait, I'm a billionaire. And then he hears another voice of Perry White. And Perry's like, you want to know who Superman is? It's me. And he like ripped open his shirt. And everyone else in the Daily Planet's like, Perry, please put your shirt back on. And then Superman takes him aside into the broom closet, and he's like, I don't remember any of that. Thanks, Superman. And Superman's like, that's weird. All my friends and companions are acting like different aspects of me. It must be because I had that mental block put in, and they deflected towards people I cared about. Well, we won't explore that anymore. So then we go back to Hive, where the Queen is waiting for them to arrive. She sees Hector Hammond's giant head pop through the fog, and is just like, oh, at last, now we can finally use your head as the weapon that Hive needs and deserves. But it turns out Hector's awake, and he's using the Hive grunts to basically make a human throne. And he's like, hi, heard you were looking for me. What can I do? And that's it. That's the issue. This was rewritten. There's so many just like weird art inconsistencies where like it's like kind of trying to describe what's happening, but at the same time it's not lining up. Like the fact that Lois is in front of a bus and then it just says something akin to a few moments later. Like, why didn't we see the swooping in? I don't understand why. Like, it's a strangely written book and the art is not keeping pace with it. So I don't know. It was a confusing read to begin with. It wasn't great by any measure. So I gotta just give this one like a 5.5. The art's great. It looks good. I like Kenneth Rocafort's art for the most part, but like when the art and the story have this much of just a basic mismatch of what they're doing, it just fails in basic storytelling. So 5.5 strictly because the art is pretty, and I guess I followed the basic beats of it, but like at every point where it could fall apart, it did, and I can't forgive that. Red Lanterns number 21, written by Charles Soule, art by Alessandro Vitti. So all of Green Lantern's 20 happened, and we basically hit the reset button on the Red Lantern Corps. And this issue opens up with Atrocitus taking one of his Red Lanterns and tearing off his ring, therefore killing him. The Red Lantern's name is Fist, by the way, Phist. And everyone's like, why did we just kill one of our own? And Atrocitus reaches into his stomach and pulls out a green thing. And he says, this is a listening device, and it's been sending everything we say to the Green Lantern Corps. So that's a thing. And he drops Fist into the blood ocean, and he's just like, okay, so we need to refocus our book real quick. I'm just going to tell all the Red Lanterns straight up. Enemy number 1, the Green Lanterns. They suck, and we're going to go after them. But first, we need to pump up our numbers. Got it? And everyone's like, yep, sounds good to me. So then we go over to Oa, where Hal is talking to Guy. And it's a whole lot of back and forth about like the state of the Corps and how everything's going and whatnot. But the general feel of the conversation is that back during Geoff John's run, Guy put on the Red Lantern ring a couple times. He became a Red Lantern, and Hal is saying, look, I'm still rebuilding the Corps. It's going slowly, but we lost our listening device over at the Red Lanterns. I need you to go in and be undercover. And Guy's like, no, that's an awful idea. Why in the hell would I do that? And he's like, look, I'm not telling you you have to. I'm just asking if you will, because they are a threat. They are something that is dangerous to us as a tiny little Green Lantern Corps that's still rebuilding. And I would like it if I could have you on the inside. And he's like, all right, I'll think about it, but I'd like it a lot more if I didn't have to go back to that crappy planet Yzmalt. Meanwhile, on Yzmalt, everyone is bathing in the blood ocean, and apparently they're using the ocean to make more rings, and he's only able to make 10 right now, and Bleez is like, seriously, that's bolstering our numbers, it's just 10 more rings? And Atrocitus is like, but it's exponential. Each of those 10 will recruit 10 more, and then those 100 will recruit 10 each there, and soon we will have millions. It's all part of my multi-level marketing scheme. And Bleez is like, wow, that is evil. Okay. So then Atrocitus says, all right, well, while we're waiting for them to show up, Rancor, the human one who can make constructs. And he's like, yeah, boss. He's like, we're all going to share your blood so that we can have your constructs. And dude pulls out 2 swords. And he's like, screw you. This is mine. This is my special power. I'm not sharing my blood with you. And he's like, dude, you're a Red Lantern. Share with us. And he's like, no. So they start fighting. We cut back to Guy in his bar. And he's talking to, I forget his name. But like the one that was part of the like Mad Company. The super like gung-ho Expendables kind of guy. And he's just like, oh, hey, like, yeah, Hal asked me to join the Red Lanterns. Ain't that crazy? And he's like, well, I mean, Hal trusts you. You're part of his inner circle. Like, a guy like me, he doesn't know. He doesn't trust. You're probably the only one that Hal could trust to do it. And there's a little joke in here about, like, oh, well, let me make you a drink. It won't have any tiny pink umbrellas in it. I wouldn't even let that in my bar. And then they say, no offense, Lantern Swixel, who is a tiny little umbrella Green Lantern. So I don't know why that was there, but it was funny. So at that point, he's like, that's why. Guy basically says, like, that's why I'm going back to the Reds. And he's saying, I'm doing it for, not for Hal, not for the Corps, but for the Michelada, which is the drink he made. And he's like, the guy's talking to, he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, I'll explain later. So we see that Atrocitus is called a ceasefire on Rancor. And he's like, all right, fine, keep your damn constructs. Like, we don't need them, I guess. But we are going to get them one of these days. And at that point, there's like, all right, we still got to wait for the rings to return. So I guess who's up for Parcheesi? And then Guy shows up and he's like, hey, I want in. And he comments on how miserable this place looks, even more so than usual, in that, like, Dexstar looks emaciated and everyone else looks like they're half dead. And Atrocitus is like, what are you doing here, man? And he's like, what do you mean? Once a Red Lantern, always a Red Lantern, right? He's like, yeah, but no. Like, you're a Green Lantern. Get out of here. And he's like, okay, look, I get it. Here's the thing, though. I'm tired of the Green Lantern Corps. Like, all that crap they just did, the Guardians and whatnot, screw them. I'm here to give you blueprints to Oa. Here you go. Here's all of them. And he's like, it's pretty interesting. I'm hearing you out. And you know what? Here's a ring. You can have it. If I were stupid. And then he proceeds to attack Guy Gardner. And they just get into this big-ass fight. Apparently, the Red Lantern energy drains the energy of Green Lanterns, like, remarkably so. Wasn't aware of that, but he's quickly dropping in battery power. And Guy has this internal monologue running of, he's like, you want to know what makes me angry? Here's what makes me angry. It's all this crap that I dealt with when I was a cop. It's like all this crap that I like see and I can't do anything about. He lists off like a whole bunch of stuff here of, let me see if I can find it real quick. He lists off a whole bunch of stuff of like the dead mom and the drunk dad and the way that the first thing made the second, broken trust and people who refuse to see how good they've got it, and just says like pretty much everything just pisses me off, makes me angry. And so he launches an attack back at Atrocitus and he manages to get him to the ground. His ring is almost out of power, and he reaches down and rips off Atrocitus's ring, therefore nearly killing him, but Dexstar comes in and gives like a protective bubble and takes Atrocitus away. Guy slips on Atrocitus's ring, and his internal monologue says, I'm done being the good guy, as he transforms fully into a Red Lantern. So that's an issue. That's a hell of a way to shake up the status quo. I mean, the cover kind of gives it away, but regardless, I like it. It's good. It's solid. I don't really know what more to say about it. It's setting up the piece. It's saying, all right, Guy is now a Red Lantern, and he is working undercover for the Green Lanterns. But like, one of the comments he made earlier was, he might just go feral. He might just be a Red Lantern, because it does kind of feel right to him in a lot of ways. And when you're wearing the red ring, it just kind of keeps you in that cycle of rage. So I'm interested. I know this stays as a status quo for a long time, and I'm interested to see where we go with it and how much he actually is working with the Green Lantern Corps still. So overall, I'll give this one, I'll give it a 7.5. And I do want to point out that Alessandro Vitti's art, great for the Red Lanterns. Looks awesome. Do not like Guy. something's wrong with his face. I don't know what it is, but there's just like something not there. So art's hit or miss for me, but the rest of it, I'm interested. Aquaman number 21, written by Geoff Johns, art by Pelletier. So there's like 7 plots all ongoing in this book, so it's kind of hard to recount what happened last time. But the big thing was that Mara ended up going back to whatever the name of that place was where she originally came. Zebel, that was it. Went back to Zebel, and she is met by her quote-unquote husband. So this picks up Bermuda Triangle, where Zebel is, and everyone's like, oh my god, Queen Mara, she's back. And it's just like, great, no, great. So, who's going on? You said someone may have followed you in here. And it's just like, yeah, he knew about the shipwrecks, he knew what's up. And it's just like, oh, was it an Atlantean? Is it someone we need to kill? And it's just like, he said he was the king, but he like wasn't the king. And it's like, no, I don't know who he was. Anyway, he's a dead king. Regardless, the dude chimes in and he's like, look, you seem really eager to go back to Atlantis, but why? I assume you came back because you completed your mission. We've been waiting for you for so long. I missed you. And he pulls her in, gives her a big kiss, and she just blasts Nereus, and saying, like, we were never married. I'm not your wife. And it's like, well, you were sworn to marry me once you completed your mission and killed the king of Atlantis. Did you do it? And she's like, so I may have met someone else. And then we cut over to Aquaman, who is currently swimming after a submarine. And it's apparent that he's able to swim a lot faster than other Atlanteans, which I didn't realize that was a thing. But regardless, he's swimming, and we can see how Tula, Merc, and the others are all watching on, and not Tula, Merc, a couple of the Atlanteans are watching on, being like, no, he's a freak. He's able to swim so fast. And he attacks this submarine where Scavenger is, and he just basically breaks in and starts asking questions. And he goes through this whole monologue of like, oh, I am Aquaman, king of Atlantis, my birthright, blah, blah, blah. But he breaks into the submarine, tears it open, and just starts interrogating everybody. Like, tell me where Scavenger is. Where is he? And Scavenger pops on a TV screen, and he's like, hey, I'm not in there. I'm elsewhere. And nothing you can do about it. And Aquaman tells him, like, bring yourself in and give us back the weaponry. And Scavenger's like, no, you attacked my people, the people on land. How dare you ask for your weaponry back? And he's like, don't act like you care about your people. And he's like, you're right. I care about you. You interest me. You're very intriguing to me. So he taunts Arthur, saying like, yeah, you're the king of Atlantis right now, but how long until they throw you out again? Like 6 months maybe, tops. Regardless, we're going to meet up soon, and I look forward to it. And then he goes offline, and we see that this was never about the weapons for Scavenger. This was about a bigger thing, and he's telling his entire crew to prepare this entire fleet of submarines. So we see Volko in his cell, yells out to the guards, and guards come up and they're like, what's up? And he's like, look, I've been stuck staring at this piece of seaweed just drifting in the currents for like months, but the currents have changed, and that's not normal, and you need to tell Aquaman that, because he has risen. So then we go to the medical area where that one Atlantean who was like cut open by Scavenger, he's being treated. Aquaman comes in being like, how's it going? And the chief like medical officer is like, get the hell out of here. You're not allowed in here. Get out. And he's just trying to get some information. Other people are coming in trying to alert Arthur of like, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like we received some information about some Atlantean weaponry and also something about Mara, and Volko wants to talk to you, and all these people are coming in talking to Arthur, and the medical officer's like, get out, why are you in my operating room? Shoo. But as soon as one of them says Mara, he just shoots off like a lightning bolt, and we see that Mara and Tula and all them are watching on and just like, okay, he's leaving, now's our chance, we are going to go up to the surface and free Orm, the true king of Atlantis, because he deserves it. And Tula's like, I don't know, this seems kind of a bit much. And Merc's basically just like, this is our only chance. Are you in or are you out? And seems like she's gonna wrestle with it, but she's probably gonna be in. So then we go back to Mara, who's talking to Hurwitz, whatever his name is, and she basically explains like, look, they didn't even know about Zebel. The Atlanteans have no idea what Zebel is, and like they have no idea why we're pissed at them. So I think that all of the like stories we were told are kind of just made up. And so immediately she's called a traitor and she's being attacked. Nerbus says, attack the queen, arrest her. But then all of a sudden the guards start freezing one by one. And Nerbus is like, what did you do? And he freezes along with her as well. And we see Arthur, he's just bolting it to the Bermuda Triangle. He knows that she has gone to Zebel based off what the guards said. And the only way to enter Zebel is via shipwreck in the Bermuda Triangle. So he finds a yacht out there and he just sinks it. He just straight up attacks it, takes it to the bottom of the sea, and uses it to gain access to Zebel. And when he gets there, he sees the dead king is sitting on a throne of ice. And he's like, oh yeah, she's here, along with my other subjects. And he's like, who the hell are you? Like, what are you doing there? And it's just like, oh, you've forgotten me, huh? It's a fate worse than the tomb your ancestors put me in. And we get a whole bunch of quick cuts to a bunch of different plots all at once here, of the big reveal being that the dead king is the first king of Atlantis, who was imprisoned for some reason, and Merc and Tula and SWAT have made their way up to Louisiana for Belle Reve, and there was a tracking device inside the cut-up Atlantean from Scavenger that Scavenger has used with his horde of subs to now attack Atlantis. So that's the big ending reveal. There's a lot going on, and I don't dislike the fact that there are so many different plots going on. My problem is the fact that they don't feel like they're getting the attention they deserve. The only one that I feel is getting that level is the Volko plot, but that's only because he's in jail, and so him seeing some seaweed change is basically all that he requires. The Scavenger plot feels underdeveloped. The Going After Orm plot feels underdeveloped. The First King of Atlantis plot feels underdeveloped. They don't feel like they've gotten enough attention, and as such, I kind of don't care about any of them. It's obvious that the First King plot's kind of going to be the main point. It's going to be the central focus, but he hasn't done anything. All he's done is shown that he has ice powers. Cool, great. And I don't know what he wants. I don't know what he's doing. He's just there. So I don't know. I just wanted a little bit more out of this. I'll give it a 6.5 if you really hold me to it, because this issue it's doing more of what it's been doing, just not enough. And that's the problem I'm having with it. The Flash number 21, written by Francis Manapul and Brian Buccellato, art by Francis Manapul. So last issue, we discovered that somebody was stealing the Speed Force energy out of people, and Flash thinks it might have been Kid Flash from the Teen Titans, because, sure, why not? This issue picks up with him already having tracked down Kid Flash, and they are currently just racing around the world with him trying to catch up with Kid Flash, because they're both fast. And I mean, I could cover this issue extremely quickly, no pun intended, because not a lot happens outside of that. So they just continue chasing. Bart, who is of course Kid Flash, goes into the Louvre and starts throwing around priceless piece of art. And so Kid Flash has to catch it all. And we keep on getting this internal monologue for Barry of him saying these kids today have no respect. And it's like, okay, sure, why not? So he runs into the Sahara Desert, and Kid Flash causes a dust storm, which blinds Barry enough that he's able to get away. And we see sometime later in India, Kid Flash is calling up the Teen Titans and saying he kept yelling something about murder. I don't know. I guess he just wants his name back, probably. Regardless, if I see him again, I'm going to drop him on his... And then Barry shows up and be like, oh, my what? Huh? What do you want? So then he grabs Kid Flash, and this huge lightning bolt of energy just shoots out into space, seemingly catching the attention of some space judges, they're wearing powdered wigs and crap. And then Barry's like, okay, hold on, the Speed Force just told me that you're from the distant future, or not even from this timeline. So, And also, you're not even connected to the Speed Force. What are you, dude? And Kid Flash is like, wouldn't you like to know, Grandpa? And he just runs away. And we see them again chasing around the world. Flash is just telling him, like, look, you're not the murderer. If you have no connection to Speed Force, then I'm not the one. But, like, I just want to talk to you and figure out what's up with you. And Kid Flash starts running so fast that he hits escape velocity and just, like, starts drifting away from the curvature of the earth. And Flash is like, dude, you need to slow down. And he's like, well, I can't now that I'm in the air. Now can I? And so Flash speeds up a little bit more to catch up to him, grabs a hold of him, and vibrates his molecules to add, like, more mass to him so that they both come crashing down into the ocean. And Flash is like, okay, you need to know the science if you're going to be running that fast. And he's like, I was only running that fast to get away from you. He's like, all right, fair, fine. I don't want to, just looking for a kill. And he's like, well, I'm not. And I don't want to tell you anything else about myself either. And literally everything Flash says, Kid Flash is like, screw you, I don't want to talk to you. But basically Flash is saying, like, look, here's the thing. I just want to help. Like, my name is, and he's about to say his name is Barry Allen. Just unmasking on this guy who wants nothing to do with him. But Kid Flash shuts him down and is just like, I don't care who you are. And I don't want you to know about me either. If I need help from anybody, I'm a part of the Teen Titans. And I trust them. I don't trust you. And he's like, fair enough. See you around. And so he takes off with the Teen Titans, and that's it. And that's it for that part of the story, really. But then we get a 2-page thing of Daniel West talking to his sister Iris. Obviously, he got out of jail, and he's, like, cleaned up his act and whatnot. And he's talking to her saying, like, look, I'm trying to be a better person, but I just want your forgiveness for the things I've done. And Iris is like, look, if you want my forgiveness, you have it on the condition that you go and ask Dad for his forgiveness for what you did to him. And Daniel's like, no, I'm never talking to that dick again. Screw him. And Iris is like, well, fine, but then I can't give you forgiveness for the things you've done. That's A leads to B there, buddy. You got to take the first step. So at that point, we see Patty is walking through the rain and doing the whole, like, parents' anniversary thing that they mentioned, like, an issue or two ago. Barry apparently forgot to pick her up, and so she was forced to walk in the rain, but she's already here. He's already here waiting at the venue, and he's like, well, since I already forgot to pick you up, I set up the whole venue for you, so hope that makes up for it, and I'll take you out for some ice cream. And she's like, oh, Barry, you're so sweet. And then we get a glimpse of Sprint, that other guy who got touched by the Speed Force. He's running down the street as best he can, trying to get away from someone who's going after his powers. And then we see Reverse Flash there, and he's like, oh, don't worry, Sprint, I'll make this quick. And he kills Sprint and says, 3 down, 2 to go. That's the issue. It's fine. It is definitely just like a pacer issue. I don't know if they're waiting on something or what's going on, but, like, the whole Kid Flash thing feels like they just had to eventually touch on the fact of, like, hey, shouldn't Flash know that there is a kid version of him, like, using his name without his permission? And they just touch on that in the most non-impactful to the story way possible. Mind you, however, I think this is also the most development we've gotten for Kid Flash, including the Teen Titans book. Like, they explained here that he's not connected to the Speed Force, which I don't think they ever did in the Teen Titans book. So curious to see how that turns out. But regardless, it's just a spacer issue. It's not critical by any means. The only major thing that happens is that another one of the Speed Force people dies. That's it. So I'll give this one a 7 sounds too high, so I'm going to go with a 6.5. But I do want to point out the art, beautiful. Looks great, and I love the sequence of Kid Flash taking off because of escape velocity. It's like, you never really consider that. The fact that if you go so fast, like, yeah, you're just going to outrun gravity. So smart little writing bits like that give it a little edge, but it still is just a completely skippable issue. Justice League of America number 5, written by Geoff Johns, art by Brett Booth. So last issue, a guy named Dr. Light got zapped by light powers, and Catwoman got shot in the head. So this issue picks up with Simon Baz, Green Lantern, along with his trainer, Beej the Squirrel. they're now being brought back to Earth and saying like, yeah, no, you might want to think about joining the JLA because it's a big thing for you. And Amanda Waller's saying she'll clear off all that domestic terrorism stuff. And he's like, okay, but I'm like a space ranger now. Like, do I really need to worry about America as much? And they basically are saying like, yeah, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. He just wants to get back to normal life. But as they're about to shake hands on it, there's a big boom and the energy is being drawn out of their rings and they don't know what's causing it. But we see that it's absolutely, definitely Dr. Light. So then cut back to the secret society of villains after having shot Catwoman. We see Signal Man and Blockbuster there, and they're like, oh God, we just shot Cat. Like, what's Batman going to do? And the weird leader guy, who at this point now is like repeatedly laughing, so he's clearly something about the Joker, maybe. He's saying like, oh, I'm going to drop her off at his front door. He's definitely going to find out about it. And Signal Man's like, this seems like suicide. Are we part of like a doomsday cult? Like, Batman's going to kill us, right? And Copperhead's like, psh, man, have some faith. Like, this place is awesome. We're going to do cool things. But as they're picking up Catwoman's body, her blood starts moving around, and turns out it was Martian Manhunter the whole time, which is apparently covered in the backup story, but like, I'll get to that eventually. So he starts fighting back against Signal Man and Copperhead, and then we see the rest of the League fighting against Dr. Ivo's Shaggy Man robot. And the leader guy, which I don't have a better name for him yet, so the leader is calling up Ivo being like, hey, how's it going? He's like, it's fine. We're crushing them down here. They ain't able to do anything about us. So at that point, Signal Man comes busting through the wall, and we see it's Martian Manhunter. And he's like, hey, it was me the whole time. Catwoman's still alive. And in fact, Catwoman at that point comes swooping out of the rafters to attack Blockbuster and teams up with Martian Manhunter. And she's like, who would have seen this team up coming? The cat and the alien. That doesn't really work, does it? Manhunter's like, no, not really. So at this point, the leader calls up Ivo and says, okay, I don't know how they did it. Regardless, we're going to need to teleport. We're going to need to activate, quote unquote, him. Is he ready? And Ivo's like, not really. We're like, if we do this too soon, we risk killing him. And it's like, well, we're out of options, so we got to do it now. So at that point, Ivo sends a couple of the other Justice League robots after Hawkman because Hawkman just refuses to go down. And as they're attacking him, Stargirl finally jumps into the fray and takes them all out because apparently that's like kind of her specialty, is dealing with robots. So she gets Hawkman back up to his feet and he's like, all right, I'm going to go punch out Shaggy Man now. So that fight continues on. We see the entire JLA is going to chase down Ivo, who's making his way to the engine room. And they're like, hey, Stargirl, yeah, we just caught up with Ivo. What are you doing here? And she's like, part of the JLA. I figured I may as well go on at least one mission. So at that point, we see the leader go in and is about to press this big red button hidden inside of a globe. And as he's about to do so, Catwoman pushes Blockbuster through the wall. She comes in afterwards and grabs his hand and says like, all right, well, stopped you from whatever the big red button was going to be. Now tell me what your name is. And he uses an electrical shock hidden on his palm to take out Catwoman. And then Martian Manhunter comes in and is just like, okay, well, you may be able to not tell her your name, but I can figure it out because I am a mind reader. And he's like, oh, please do. Hop on in there. My mind is an open book. I want you to know what's going on up here. So at that point, it's like 4 different plots all going on at the same time. First one is that Stargirl is only able to take down the Shaggy Man with her magic staff if she has direct access to the robotics, so they have to strip off his shaggy exterior first. So there's just a whole thing of them doing that, and then Stargirl takes out Shaggy Man. And then the second thing is they make their way into the engine room and see that the person inside is a guy named Kronos who has time-based teleportation powers or something. Like, he leaks chronal energy. And we'll get back to that in a second. And then Martian Manhunter reads the guy's mind, and it turns out that he watched his whole world die as well. So this guy is from a dead planet. Again, don't know from where. But regardless, Kronos ends up being activated, and the whole reason they use him is that they don't actually teleport the house around. They freeze it in time and space and let the world spin underneath it, so that way they just suddenly pop up. Like, it's all of a sudden just, they enter into the time stream again. And the only way to not be ripped apart by that is to have their little special clubhouse coins, which obviously none of the JLA do, so they're all forced to run out of the house as quickly as possible, whereas the Secret Society gets away. Though they did manage to grab Signalman, Copperhead, and Kronos and save them before the house disappears in the blast of energy. So, cut back to Argus, Amanda Waller saying, JLA is done. You guys have failed in your mission, and there's no way that you'd ever be ready to fight the Justice League. And Steve Trevor's like, but we managed to save Kronos, and we know so much about them now. And, like, I think that there's the makings of a really good team here. And Waller's like, nah, screw that. We're going to get all new people. And he's like, no, you're going to give us a chance, and we're going to prove you wrong, Waller. We're going to be the best damn heroes you've ever seen. And he storms out. And Waller's like, Jesus Christ, that was too easy. This guy, he's an idiot. So, at that point, apparently, they piece together the stained glass window they got from the manor, like the pieces of it, and it forms an image of Pandora's box, which Waller knows intimately well because of the events of Team 7. So then we see the rest of the team is all back together. They're being introduced to Green Lantern, Simon Baz, and they're like, that's not Green Lantern. Who the hell is this guy? If that's Green Lantern, I'm Wonder Woman. And then we finally get the final reveal, which is Dr. Light. And they're like, all right, how's he recovering? And all of a sudden the lights go out and this blinding flash of light comes out of his hospital room. And you see him just glowing inside saying, please help me. And Waller says, oh, we'll help you, Dr. Light, as long as you help us. So this is the first like official lead into Trinity War. I don't even know where that's supposed to begin, but it's happening. So Trinity War, that's a thing. I mean, this issue was good. It was fine. It was a lot being thrown out all at once. It didn't really feel like it ended the fight, but I don't think it was supposed to. It was more so of a, no, you got a glimpse behind the scenes. You saw things you weren't supposed to, and now you have a better idea as to what's coming up in the future, but you never actually won the fight. So, in that regard, it's fine, but it does definitely feel like this whole book up till this point has kind of just existed for the purpose of Trinity War. And it doesn't feel like it's actually earned its space to exist on its own yet. So we'll see if it gets there. I'll give this one a, I don't know. It's 7 sounds right, but I also just hate giving things 7 because it feels too generic. But it is like a 7. It's not great. The Brett Booth art definitely brings it down in my book, save for a couple of pages where I think it works well. But in a general sense, it's not my vibe. Beyond that, it's kind of just feels like, okay, we're building up to the event. It's not its own story. It's just a prologue to the event. All-Star Western number 21, written by Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray, art by Moritat. So, last issue, it doesn't matter. Like, they Booster Gold got one of the prisoners and some money and whatnot, and they're being chased by horses, is how this one opens up. But it literally doesn't matter, because the whole thing is that Booster Gold doesn't know how to steer the horses, and as they're being shot at, the prisoner gets shot in the head, so he's dead anyway. Jonah Hex jumps onto the wagon to use the really big minigun in the back, and Booster, still not knowing how to drive these horses, ends up driving them over a cliff. And so Jonah is going off this cliff along with Booster, and then all of a sudden they disappear in a flash of light, and we see that they are traveling through time. Booster is using his time travel tech to travel through time, and he's like, look, Jonah, I'm sorry about all that. I know you're probably pissed, but you need to hold on to me real tight. And Jonah just punches him in the face and lets go, so now he's lost in the time stream. But then all of a sudden he falls out. And when he wakes up, he sees a couple of like steampunk-looking guys are like, oh god, this guy must be drunk. Anyway, hey, sir, the train stopped. You got to get off. And so Jonah gets up, he stumbles out, and as he makes his way out, he sees that he is in probably modern-day Gotham. I say probably because there's a few little things that seem weird, but regardless, he's in modern day Gotham, and he looks around and he sees all this crazy technological stuff. He sees all the crowds and planes and helicopters, and he's like, God damn it, Booster, what did you do? And then we cut down into an alleyway where a group from Wisconsin are visiting, and they made their way down the wrong alley in Gotham, of all places. And they're being attacked by members of the Mutants gang, which is specifically from The Dark Knight Returns, like Frank Miller's story, which is set in the future. So I don't know if we're supposed to be in the future, but like it doesn't say. So either way, Jonah shows up here and he's like, hey, you leave that family alone or you die. And at that point, one of them yells out, it's like, oh, look at here, we got a cowboy. And Jonah just shoots him in the head. And immediately the other two were like, we're willing to leave now. And Jonah says, yeah, I bet so. And he shoots them as well. And the family's like, dear Lord, please don't hurt us, whoever you are. And he's like, don't worry. Like, I'm on your side. I'm good. I just want to know where and when I am. And at that point, Gotham City police show up, and they've got tasers trained on him, and he's willing to give himself up. He's like, no, don't worry. Like, they were the ones who were holding these people at gunpoint. I just saved their lives. I'm a bounty hunter, if that means anything. And he offhandedly makes a comment on how one of the cops is black, and how he didn't expect that. Like, he's like, how long has that been a thing? And here's like, okay, all right, we're dropping this guy. So they shoot him with the tasers. He goes down for a second, but then as they try to cuff him, he starts fighting against them. He's like, I don't know what kind of bullets those were, but I ain't letting you do that again. And at that point, he's like, okay, I know I'm in Gotham now, but what year am I in? And at that point, Shadow of a Bat pops up on the wall behind him, but it turns out it's Batwing. And Batwing comes in and starts beating him, and he's just like, yes, get your family out of here. I'll take care of the redneck in a racially insensitive costume. And so they start fighting. Jonah keeps on telling him, like, dude, I'm not an enemy. But, like, if you're going to fight me, then I'm going to fight back. Like, that's how this is going to go. And so it's just, him trying to throw punches against Batwing. Batwing's obviously wearing armor, so that doesn't matter really much at all. And Batwing's like, okay, well, tell me what your name is. And he says, like, oh, I'm Jonah Hex. And he's like, yeah, okay, sure you are, buddy. Well, either way, during their fight, he mentions, like, oh, yeah, you crazies all here in Gotham. No wonder Arkham loved it so much. And so Batwing hears Arkham. He's like, oh, You're an Arkham inmate. All right, well, I don't like beating up on the mentally handicapped here, so I'm going to put you out real quick. And he uses gut punch to knock the wind out of him and basically knock him out. And then final pages here, we see Jonah coming to. He's in a straight jacket with a single light for a door, and he's screaming, let me out of here. I'm not crazy. I'm a free man. You can't hold me against my will. And now he's trapped in Arkham Asylum. That's the issue. I mean, this arc has been so weird. We started with one villain who was killed immediately into the next issue. And then we get this, which was like we go in and we take all this money from the secondary villain. But then it turns out that secondary villain doesn't matter because now we're in the future. And I don't understand what we're doing. If we stay in the future, or the present even, I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with that. But it's starting to feel like they're writing specifically against the trade. Like, they're like, oh, you want to collect all of our issues into like a nice little succinct volume that collects the story arcs? Screw you. We're going to write it as meanderingly and as possible to comprehend as possible. Which I don't think that every story needs to be written for the trade, but I also don't think that, like, none of these plots have had endings. They've ended at the first page of the last issue, but, like, that's not satisfying, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't feel like I'm getting a full story out of it. Booster Gold just disappeared. He was a major player for the last 3 issues, and now he's just gone because he didn't know how to drive a wagon. It's so weird to me. So overall, I'll give this one like I'm giving it a 6.5. And the 0.5, it just barely earns. Because I want to know what I'm supposed to be, like, paying attention to at this point. It feels like this is just, they were almost given the cancellation notice, but then it got rescinded again, and they were just like, bouncing back and forth about what they want to do as a story. And if we finally locked onto he's in present day, so be it. But I lock it down. Let me care about something for more than one issue. Green Team, Teen Trillionaires number 2, written by Art Baltazar and Franco, art by Guara. So last issue, the Green Team, they're not really even a team yet, but they were all attacked by some guy named Riot, who was able to clone himself, maybe? I don't know. It's still very up in the air. Regardless, they all jump into a car for protection. The bodyguard gets hit and is knocked out temporarily. And they're unable to start the car because it's the one that is fueled off of social media likes. So they're trying to get into the phone, but they don't know the passcode, so they're just kind of stuck there. Meanwhile, Cecilia, the actress, is being held at knife point, and Riot's basically like, all right, you got to give us your money so that everything's fair and equal. And Commodore is just telling him, like, you're not here for the money. You're here for my suit, my, like, Iron Man suit. That's all you want. And he's like, yeah, okay, that's fair. Mind you, the entire internal monologue here is Cecilia saying, like, oh, God, I hope I don't die here. If I die, I hope TMZ doesn't break my death first. So at that point, JP Houston manages to get a disc with the number 2 on it onto Cecilia's wrist, and it becomes a suit, a secondary suit for her. And we see as the suit is going on, her arm gets nicked by Riot's knife, but then is immediately healed up by the suit as it comes over top of her. And then Commodore says, like, okay, Cecilia, you got the suit? Great. All the weapons and stuff are controlled by the fingertips. Just, like, move your fingertips around and that'll do it. And she moves her, like, pinky finger on her right hand, and that is for her rocket boots to activate. And he's like, no, okay, any other fingers, not that one. So she ends up running into JP, and they just go flying out the building. One of the Riot clones is attached to them, and so Commodore starts trying to take off after them, but his suit fails, and he's not able to fly after it. So at that point, he looks around, he sees his jacket nearby, he reaches into the pocket just in time and pulls out a little car clicker thing, which as soon as he presses it, in through the wall comes the Batmobile from Batman 89. And all of Riot's like, seriously, Batman's here? And it's just like, nah, just this car. I bought it. And so he uses the Batmobile to grab onto the car that Mo and what's her name, LL are in, and drags them out onto the street away from the rest of the Riot clones. Meanwhile, up in the air, Commodore is trying to text JP, and he's, reaching for his phone, trying to get it, because, it's information on how to control the suit, and in trying to get to his phone, he loses a grip and falls off of Cecilia. She activates an electrical blast accidentally that zaps away the rest of the Riot people on her, and all around them, every one of the Riot clones apparently feels that electrical blast, including an old man in Monaco, who then immediately goes and reaches for his phone and tries calling up Riot. And Riot's like, yeah, no, we were electrocuted. You felt that too? Anyway, yeah, we got the suit. Like, we know it exists, but the problem is now there's 2 of them. So what do you want to do? They're not important for the rest of this. So now we go back to Commodore. He's talking to, whatever that guy's name is, whoever it is. And he's basically like, okay, is everyone okay? Are we all cool? And LL calls her out for having calls him out for having a Batmobile. And he's just like, oh, you bought a used Batmobile? I was like, yeah, I bought a used Batmobile. If it's not used, it's not a Batmobile. It has to be used by Batman, idiot. So we see JP landed in the river nearby, as did Cecilia, and he helps her out, and they see that the phone managed to survive the fall as well. So they are texting Commodore, and he explains how to take off the suit, and she looks down at where that cut was on her arm, and she's like, it's so weird that cut's not there anymore. Anyway, we got to get someplace, we got to figure out where to go next. And Commodore says, yeah, we'll meet up later, just get somewhere safe for now. So Commodore is talking to his group, And we see, and I wish I knew this guy's name. They just never repeat it. The main kid, whoever it is, Mo. That's it. So Mo, LL, and his bodyguard are walking the Commodore down the street. And Mo basically offers up, hey, I have a place in town that my dad rents out, but he never uses. Like, we could go there. And the bodyguard's like, I think I need to call your dad. I think this is important. He's like, hey, I can't stop you, bodyguard. You do what you have to do. But then he zaps his bodyguard's phone without him noticing. So he's unable to text it out anyway. So JP and Cecilia are making their way into a super highbrow hotel. They stink because they were in the Hudson River. And the doorman's trying to stop them, saying they're not allowed in. But then he flashes this $100 million credit limit credit card. And it's just like, yeah, we're going to need your penthouse along with 15 cases of champagne. And all of your towels replaced with Versace. And lo and behold, they get it. So then we see that Mo's place, he takes Commodore there. Mo has actually been outbidding Commodore on all of his eBay bids for superhero items. And Commodore's like, you're My Little Pony 24? And Mo's like, yeah, that's my screen name. So Commodore basically explains, look, I think I may have gotten the wrong impression. Your dad didn't send you, did he? He's like, no, I'm here to try to learn from you how to make more money so that I can impress my dad. And Commodore tells him, money has secrets. I'm trying to do something right here. I'm trying to make the world a better place. But you need to understand that if your dad has that much money, he has tons of secrets. And you need to question everything you know about him. And the bodyguard gets a bit defensive. But Commodore's just like, look, if he doesn't find anything, great. All more power to him. But I want him to at least look. So at that point, we see JP and Cecilia have made their way into the penthouse. All the people room service have exited, and they start making out. And it turns out that Cecilia is supposedly dating Commodore, but only just so she can have the money to do her acting gig. She's actually really secretly dating JP. And she's like, oh yeah, I feel kind of guilty, whatnot, but still, it's what has to be done. And JP kind of wants to just let the news come out and wants them to be a real couple. So they get into an argument over that. And she storms off the bed alone. And we see in the middle of the night, he's asleep on the couch. He wakes up and there's a news story about how she missed her first day at this new film gig. She's supposed to show up for her show call. And so he walks into the bedroom to wake her up, saying that he missed a call time. And as he flips on the light, turns out she now has a robotic arm because the suit, techno-organic, something. It's a lot. So I like this issue more than I like the first one. I think that it did a good job now of it's focusing, it's taking its time. It's not just saying, here's all this money and technology and crazy stuff. It's saying, here's the characters and their interactions with each other. And it's saying what each of them believe, what each of them want to do, how their morals work out. There's this love triangle thing going on. I'm intrigued. I enjoy that it took the time to do that. That being said, I do think that our audience character of Mo has been given the shortest possible stick in that I don't feel like I know anything about him yet. But if he's supposed to develop over the course of this, maybe it's intentional. So overall, this one, it's okay. It's probably closer to a 6.5 than anything else. It's not quite breaking into good territory, but it's a fine enough issue. And I do enjoy the art. I think it has a nice sense of action to it. And I managed to follow the story well enough, though that's not really a compliment so much as it is a good job you did the bare minimum. So yeah, 6.5 for this. Teen Titans number 21, written by Scott Lobdell and Tony Bedard, art by Eddie Barrows, and apparently Jesus Marino, according to the trade. So, last issue we had Trigon attack, they fought him off, and then Trigon's brothers all showed up. Trigon's sons, who are three brothers of Raven. And so, Red Robin's like, hey, they called you little sister. Are they actually your brothers? And it's like, yep, they are, and they are here to kill everyone. And so it's Teen Titans versus these three demons, and they're like, okay, we're going to make this really easy for you. Step away from our sister, and then we will destroy your world. And he's like, that's not a very good deal. And so at that point, Superboy interrupts their whole thing. He sends out a telekinesis wave, and that allows them to initiate pattern 6, which is basically everyone split up and take one. And so I'm just going to go through each one of the things on their own. So the first thing we get is Wonder Girl and Bunker take the one with an axe. And Wonder Girl's like, hey, let me handle this fight. My suit was literally designed to fight the agents of Trigon. And Bunker's like, but I can make purple bricks into a suit of armor, so I'm also good. And he's like, yeah, Bunker, you're fine, you're good. So they stand up against like a big wave of like flames and shit like that from the pair of them. We see that Wonder Girl manages to wrap her lasso around the guy's axe and hold him in place long enough for Bunker to literally drop a bunch of bricks down on his head, seemingly knocking him out and crushing his skull in the process. So secondary one is Kid Flash along with, what's her name? Solstice. And they run him deep into Midtown and just start supersonic speed punching the crap out of him. He doesn't have any weapons, and Kid Flash calls him out on it. And it's just like, oh, your brother had an axe, and the other one had like something as well. You got nothing. And he's like, oh, but I do. And so he looks like he goes unconscious, and Solstice is like, man, I just caught up, and you've already knocked him unconscious. That's great. And turns out that he actually just possessed Kid Flash. So the Solstice somehow realizes between the pages, and she starts chasing down Kid Flash throughout the town. He gets hit in the head with a single rock, like not even bigger than his hand, and he immediately just falls to the ground and snaps out of it. And he's like, yes, it seems though he was already struggling to keep his possession over me as my mind moves at 873 miles per hour. And then he just leans in and kisses Solstice, and she's like, oh, okay, well, this is happening. So then the last one is Superboy, Red Robin, Beast Boy, and Raven, all against the oldest brother. And he starts firing off like huge fire blasts at them. Beast Boy turns into a T-Rex to protect them and then introduces himself. He's like, oh, by the way, I'm Beast Boy. And it's like, oh, yeah, thanks. Anyway, that's demonic fire. I doubt T-Rex hide is tough enough to deal with that. Raven, you got anything to deal with it? And she's like, yeah, my soul self can be protected by the fire. And it's like, okay, can you transfer that soul self power onto other things? And she's like, yeah, probably if we share like a touch. And so she touches Superboy's hand, and he turns blue to signify he's unaffected by the fire. But apparently the act of being in the soul self is in itself like horrendously horrifying within its own right. So yeah, he goes through a bunch to fly in and basically land a punch on the main guy. And at this point, there's a little cutaway to a classified location where a shadowy figure who's definitely not Amanda Waller is watching over this fight, saying like, how do we get a control on this? Like, we've got to figure out what's up, because at this point we're going to have to mind wipe all of Manhattan. And it doesn't go anywhere. It has nothing to do with this. But either way, the demon lands a punch on Superboy. Superboy goes down for a second, and as he's about to be attacked further, Red Robin comes in and slices off the demon's hands with his wings. And it turns out the demon can just regrow them. It's not even a big deal. So then Beast Boy, off to the side where Raven is, he's like, hey, this is your family, Raven, and if anyone can beat them, it's you. And she's like, I don't know if I know how. And he's like, well, you're not going to be alone, so let's go find out together. So at that point, we see the demon laying a smackdown on both Superboy and Red Robin, and then all of a sudden, he just seizes up, fall over, and dies. And turns out that Raven used her ability to take his heart out of his body, and she's just holding it in his hand, or in her hand, and saying like, oh, it'll grow back in a few minutes, but that's going to be me making my point that you can't beat us when we all work together. And so the rest of the team all assembles and just like, well, if I've learned one thing in my existence, it's that Trigon never gives up. He's going to keep coming back. And then literally right then, Trigon springs back up. He takes control of Bunker, Superboy, Kid Flash, and Wonder Girl. And it's like, yeah, and I'm going to do it right now. And I'm going to attack you with your own teammates. Tee-hee. And that's it. That's the issue. If Trigon was just going to come right back, why in the hell are we bothering with like this whole little extra thing here of like, oh, but the brothers are going to show up first? Like, who cares? Just just keep him around, man. Have him still destroying the city while they have to deal with these demons. Why are we having this whole thing where like he took 5 minutes away and then it's just relaunching an attack? It's just poor writing issue to issue. So, I mean, it's art-wise, it's okay. There was nothing in the writing that seemed awful. The only real critique I have out of it is that it just feels unnecessary. Like, all of this felt like padding for Trigon. Like, Trigon didn't need a break, and yet they decided to give him one anyway, and we're just waiting it out until he comes back. So, yeah, I'll give this one I don't know. It's not awful. It's a 6. I mean, that's the thing. It's not, like, actively horrible, but it just feels so unnecessary. So, yeah, 6 for this. Justice League Dark number 21, written by Jeff Lemire and Ray Fox, art by Mikel Janin. So last issue we had Dr. Destiny revealing that he is actually the daughter of Madame Xanadu, and that's a whole big thing. So we get a glimpse here from Madame Xanadu's perspective 20 years from now. She is surrounded by the dead bodies of all of the people who have ever worked with Justice League Dark. And Dr. Destiny and even like Sargon are there standing over Xanadu and Constantine and just like, aha, here we stand at the end, exactly as you foretold, Xanadu. And turns out inside of Constantine's body is actually Boston, Deadman. And he's like, oh, of course I was going to be here with you at the end. I need you to, I was always going to be with you. Like that was how this was going to go. And so Dr. Destiny says, you know, this is the end of the world. I'm destroying it all and rebuilding it in my own image. And they go in and nearly share a kiss as the end of the world comes. So a little bit of a romance there between Xanadu and Boston. But then we cut back to now. And we see this was all just a vision from her. And Dr. Destiny's like, I mean, everyone else, did she not tell you that I was her son? Did she not mention that? Kind of important, that I am definitely her child. And Constantine's calling out like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, Xanadu, tell us if that's the case. And she's like, yeah, no, he's my son. Like, that was a long time ago, but regardless, we have to stop him now, or else I just had a vision. Everything's going to end. And Constantine's like, that's like the 8th time you've had that vision. Fine, whatever. So at that point, Constantine's just talking to him, saying like, all right, let's just see if we can sort this out. And Frankenstein, not wanting to waste any more time, comes in, slams down his sword, and says, enough with the banter, let's fight. So the demon Null that was like in charge of the House of Mystery is currently fighting against Frankenstein, because I guess they're evenly matched. And Null leads him away from the central part of the fight into a back room of the house that has a group of fire feeders, because apparently he's looked into Frankenstein's soul and sees that his one major fear is fire, so he's using that to his advantage here. So Deadman is in charge of going after Swamp Thing, but first we deal with all over Manhattan. Flash is just running around taking care of all these nightmares that have spawned because of the House of Mystery, and he's like, you know, at first I thought these guys were monsters, like taking the Justice League name of their own. How dare they? But like now that I'm working with them, I kind of feel like, you know, part of the gang. I feel like I'm part of this group. Maybe I am like my own little level of a freak. I'm okay with that. So regardless, we cut back and Deadman's trying to take care of Swamp Thing. Xanadu, like, Destiny's just chanting at Xanadu, like, saying, like, ah, mother, you thought you had left me to die, but then the cult of the cold flame is another. And Xanadu just comes up and punches him in the face and just like, enough. I'm sick of listening to your crap. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. Didn't you see this one coming? Smack. Just keeps punching him in the face. And Constantine's like, okay, well, you know, this is he's talking about all this extra crap about like how he's going to reign over things. But if he's working with the Cult of the Cold Flame, they're just using you, dude. They just want my house. That's all they're using you for. You're never going to get this power you're looking for. So we see Deadman making his way through a room full of ghosts, and he's like, oh, gee, isn't that creative? Ghost coming after a ghost. And he goes into Swamp Thing's body and takes possession of him, and he's like, whoa, oh, this is the green. Okay, I'm like all of the wood now. That's something. And he uses his ability to rip Swamp Thing out of the wall of the house and free him. And he's like, all right, but I think I know what to do now. I've got an idea. And so the Swamp Thing being free, he manages to use the vines and wood of the house to make a bunch of new like golems, like clones of himself, to attack. And they start taking out all the ghosts and stuff that were around. And then Deadman points out, he's like, okay, when I was part of Swamp Thing, who was part of the house, I realized that the house is conscious, which means I can possess it. So he flies into this like portal of the house and becomes the house itself. And Dr. Destiny's like, oh wait, I didn't expect that. That's really not good for me. And so all the Swamp Things start attacking. The house itself starts attacking, and all of Dr. Destiny's forces are like immediately destroyed. So Flash comes rushing in at that point, and he's like, hey guys, I think I took care of all the nightmares, and they also started disintegrating, but like, is there anything I can do in here now? And it's like, nah, I think we're basically got it under control. How about you go find Frankenstein? Haven't seen him for a while. And Flash is like, cool, can do. So Frankenstein's still fighting off the fire, and Flash just runs in, punches Null in the face, takes care of all the fireflies, and then helps Frankenstein to get his footing. And Frankenstein's like, oh, I owe you a warrior's debt. And Flash is like, don't worry about it. We're just heroes. It's what we do. So at that point, Swamp Thing binds up Dr. Destiny. He has his ruby in his chest. And Xanadu's like, okay, well, does anyone mind if I do what needs to be done here? And Boston's like, are you sure you want to do this? You look pretty shook up. And it's just like, I kind of want to tell you that I saw us making out in the future, but I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I'm good. So she takes Frankenstein's sword as Dr. Destiny's still like saying like, oh, so many secrets, mother. You keep them all to yourself. And he's just like, all right, I kept you secret for a reason. It's because you suck. And so I'm just going to take care of this. And she takes Frankenstein's sword, holds it up to Dr. Destiny, and cuts his chest wide open so that his ruby is just hers now. She takes it and just like, all right, I'm going to give this back to Constantine, and he's going to take care of it. He's going to make sure it doesn't get lost again. So, bye, I'm out. And she just leaves the house with everyone else in there. So as she's leaving, walking through downtown Manhattan, Boston catches up with her and just like, hey, no, seriously, are you okay? Like, you seem really shaken up with that. And, maybe if you're wanting to, I could keep you some company. And she looks at him and is just like, yeah, no thank you. I think I'd rather be alone right now. And she ends it by saying, and now I know that if the world is to survive, I must continue to walk it on my own. The only road that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's only me, and I walk alone. So that's that. I mean, it was good. It was a fine enough issue. It just... I guess I wish that in the beginning of this, I had known this was a Xanadu-focused arc. It felt much more to me like a Constantine-focused arc again, or even just a Swamp Thing arc, considering they brought him in. But then, nope, turns out it's all about Xanadu and her secrets, which I'm okay with. I just didn't know that going in. As for this particular issue, it's fine. I'm really sick, though, of Xanadu's visions always being like, oh no, and everybody's dead, and we're all going to die. But it's like, you keep having these visions, and none of them have happened. So how good at seeing the future are you really? I think you're just hallucinating and thinking it's the future. So, overall, I give this one I'll give it just a flat 7. I'm also not super interested in the Dead Man Xanadu romance. Like, it wasn't really hinted at before, and I don't really care for it now. It only just came up, I think, in the Books of Magic thing, after she got even younger coming back, which kind of makes Boston a bit of a creep, but whatever. It's just... It doesn't feel like it really has a focus right now. It doesn't feel like it's forwarding an overarching plot. It just kind of feels like little character drama bits that we're focusing on for a while. And honestly, I would have liked it more if we focused on the Flash. That seems super interesting to me, that he's just like, oh, now I'm working with monsters. Guess that's how Tuesdays go for me now. And that's it. That's all the comics that DC Comics put out June 26th, 2013. And for people watching the video version, for the very, very opening bit, I put on a Red Lantern ring prop that I had just for a gag, just for the bit. I can't get it off. Like, oddly fitting for being a Red Lantern ring, but it is very upsetting that I'm stuck with this now. Like, I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. I have been wrestling with this for the past 15 minutes. So that's just a thing that I have to live with now. I am now part of the Red Lantern Corps. Hooray. So anyway, yeah, comics next week. There's a decent amount of them, but I'm not going to talk about that. I made my vow in that, but I will tell you how many or which comics are coming out, I should say. So next week, we have Batman Incorporated, Batwing, Detective Comics, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, The Movement, Stormwatch, Dial H, Swamp Thing, and Phantom Stranger. But on top of all that, we have another brand new #1, which is actually the first prelude to Trinity War, if you don't count Justice League 19 and 20, which is kind of also a prologue story. But this is the first official one of Pandora #1, or more officially, Trinity of Sin, Pandora #1. I'm not going to call it that because that's a stupidly weird long title. But Pandora #1, so be sure to check that out. Sorry, I'm still just wrestling with the ring. It's bothering me a lot that this is so stuck. Anyway, comments and stuff. If you want to share your thoughts, go ahead, and I'm going to specifically direct you over to Discord, because I'm actually just tired of the other social media places. So Discord or Patreon, that is also a possibility as well. Please check those out with sugar on top. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however you consume this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week. And always remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.